friends, and welcome to another episode of Fully Booked. I'm Megan.
And I'm Shireen.
And it is still Women's History Month. It's still March, even though we're over halfway through the month now. It doesn't matter. And that means that we are still talking about everything to do with women in literature. So female authors, female characters, the good, the bad, the sort of random in between, nobody really cares about it, that kind of stuff.
And the ugly.
And yeah, the ugly aspects of that too, which we've definitely been talking about as well. But we're taking things to, as far as I think most people are concerned, a place of good this week, because we're talking about Greta Gerwig's adaptation of Little Women from 2019.
Great movie.
Which, I think is like pretty much universally loved. And this is like, I'm thinking about like from like bookworm people. Like the book community was like, yes, please, this was wonderful.
Well, it was definitely like Greta Gerwig obviously loved this book.
Oh, yeah.
And did such a good job with the adaptation.
It's such
and you can tell that all the actors felt the same way as well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, if you're looking for a like very family-oriented story with like talk about a star-studded cast.
Oh, seriously. Bob Odenkirk is the dad.
Know.
I was like, what?
I was so happy when he popped up the first time I watched it. I was like, oh, it's Saul. How
they
cute.
called Saul.
Yeah. Except they couldn't because it was the 1860s. It's fine.
But you know what I mean.
Yes. So hopefully you've seen this movie if you're going to listen to this, because we're going to like talk about several aspects of it. But if you haven't, you can come along for the ride anyway if you want to.
And then go watch it.
And then go watch it. And I'm sure you'll want to by the end of this, because we're going to talk about Little Women from 2019.
Jo, would you like to dance with me?
I can't because I scorched my dress. And Meg told me to keep still so no one would see it.
I have an idea of how we can manage.
Jo is a lost cause. So you are your family's hope now.
I believe we have some power over who we love. It isn't something that just happens to a person.
I think the poets might disagree.
So, the movie's currently sitting at a 7.8 out of 10 on IMDb and 95% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
And it's got a 92 from the audience. None of this is surprising.
No.
This is also not to be confused with the earlier I'm double checking, the earlier adaptation of this movie from 1994, which by the way also has like a crazy cast.
I don't think I've seen that one.
Have you seen that one? It's also good, I will say.
Yeah.
Like, it's a good film. Here we go. Winona Ryder plays Jo. Kirsten Dunst plays Amy. Christian Bale plays Laurie. Susan Sarandon is Marmee.
Okay, I take it back. I have seen that.
Okay, yeah. Susan Sarandon is Marmee. Like, there's a lot of people. Claire Danes is Beth. Like, it's a huge, huge cast.
Wow. Yeah, that was like a full 90s cast. Like, we got like a full late 2010s
2010s cast,
yeah.
and now and that one would have been a full 90s cast when people were actually like up and coming.
Oh yeah,
fully.
Kirsten Dunst.
Yeah, that would have been not long after Jumanji, probably.
Yes. And she would have done an interview with the vampire already.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's
she was well in her prime.
She would have been getting into it fully. So I love Kirsten Dunst.
I do too.
I think she's great in
very
everything.
underrated.
Yeah, I don't think she gets enough credit for any of the movies she's ever been in. I think she's great. Little Women, if you've never read the book, because we all say we're oh, classics, blah blah blah, but that doesn't mean people have read them.
I mean, to be fair, I thought I'd read it, and then I realized that I had read Little House in the Big Woods.
Oh, that's a totally different book. I think that's very different. I mean, it's also it's a long read as well, because it was technically published in two parts, I believe, when it was originally published, one in 1868 and then one in 1869.
Okay.
So, reasonably, technically, I kind of get it.
Yeah, fair enough.
So it's a long one, but basically the film is very female-centric because it follows a family of almost all women. Dad doesn't count, whatever.
Well, he's off fighting the Civil War.
He's off in the Civil War, so it's fine. Who, and sort of over a well, technically it's over like a 7-year period that it takes place, where you kind of see like the evolution of them as sisters and as a family. So you've got 4 sisters and their mom, who they call Marmee. But the 4 sisters, now I'm trying to remember, I believe in order of age, Meg is the oldest. She's played by Emma Watson. And then Jo, who's played by Saoirse Ronan, is the second. I believe Beth is the 3rd sister. I'm so sorry, I can't remember that actor's name at all, but she also does a good job. She's just much quieter, so I think she gets ignored a lot of the time. And the youngest is Amy, who's played by Florence Pugh.
And Elizabeth is Eliza Scanlon.
Eliza Scanlon, thank you. All of these British people were playing American characters.
Amy is older than Beth.
I thought that Amy was the youngest. Okay, maybe I'm insane, and it's just
Maybe
me.
not. Like, maybe I'm just
It might have
this
something.
wrong.
It might have something to do with the fact that.
Oh no, you're right. Her youngest sister is Amy.
Is Amy. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Thank you. Because I think it might have something to do with the fact that, to be fair, so the film jumps back and forth in perspective a lot. Instead of kind of moving from start to finish, you get a little bit of everything, because it starts more modern. Later, well, more modern, whatever. 7 years into the future from when things begin, basically, it starts with Jo March, who's Saoirse Ronan, who's been able to have a short story published, which at that time, it's 1868, keep in mind. At that time would have been a pretty impressive feat. Women weren't taken particularly seriously. And I will say that she visits a publisher, and she, goes under the guise of like a friend is submitting a story, because she doesn't want to admit that it's her work and be criticized for her work. She's very proud of what she does and what she's written, and she's quite hot-headed most of the time. So I think it would be hard for her to kind of admit, like, oh, I wrote this, and have him be like, it's shit,
I mean, I can't blame her, like, especially if she's going in knowing full well that if she submits it as a woman, that it's going to be even more criticized.
Yes.
Than a man's
than
writing.
if it were written as a man. Well, she asks for it, because he does say he cuts out a few things, like an editor will, really.
Of course, yeah.
But he says, we'll give you, $20 for it, and we'll publish it, no problem. That's fine. So they agree to do that. She's working basically as a governess in New York City, and she leaves with the money that she's gotten to go back to Concord, Massachusetts, which is where her family is, so that she can help take care of Beth, who's one of her younger sisters, who's ill and has been ill for quite a number of years at this point. She's been like kind of sickly back and forth and had a lot of health problems for quite a long time. So she's doing that. We're also getting a little bit of Amy, who, like we said, is the youngest of the 4 sisters. She's in Paris with Aunt March, played by fucking Meryl Streep.
I know. It's like, hey, Meryl Streep,
God,
what are you doing?
Cast is just absurd. Anyway, who's in Paris, trying to be a painter, but also basically she is like the sibling of the family that everyone has decided needs to be married off to someone rich, because the family's not particularly wealthy.
Isn't she like the pretty one? Like, is that what's insinuated?
She's the pretty one, and she's also
kind of the naive
she's very
one.
materialistic, and she's like a little bit vain. Like, she's very focused on material goods kind of thing, and like, sort of like what she wants in life, and she wants to be pretty, and she wants to have like a successful life and all that kind of stuff. Like, she's very determined to be that way. So while she's in Paris, she runs into Lawrence, whatever, or Teddy. No, I should say it's Theodore Lawrence. She runs into, but they call him Laurie because he asks everybody to, except for Jo, who calls him Teddy.
Right.
She runs into Laurie, who is also in Paris. He was a neighbor of theirs in Concord. He lives with his grandfather, but he's spending some time in Paris as well. Because his family is quite a bit more wealthy than the March family is.
And this comes up a few times.
It does as well. Yeah, that's it. And they, agree to meet later that evening because there's like a party that's happening. Yeah. And Amy's going, and she's meeting basically the guy who's been courting her, more or less. I think they're expecting like a proposal to be coming from their relationship sometime soon. That evening she goes to the party, but she gets really pissed because he never goes to meet her, because she's like, meet me and everything, whatever. Yeah. And I think you can kind of tell even immediately that Amy's had a crush on Laurie for like forever.
Yes.
And you don't get it
It's like a bit of a love triangle.
yeah, like
there.
you don't get the beginnings of it yet
Yeah.
because then they're gonna flash back. But you can kind of tell like she's so excited to see him when they
Yeah.
run into each other and everything. There's like a lot there, and she's very upset. To first of all that he never really went to meet her, and second of all that when she does find him, he's drunk and he's lying around with a bunch of girls and just being
acting
sloppy
like an idiot.
and stupid.
Yeah.
And we do learn almost immediately that Lori obviously had previously proposed to Joe and she said no.
Right.
So he's been unhappy since then.
Is that what prompted this behavior?
Yes,
Yeah.
to get over his heartbreak, he basically went to Paris and then
Right.
became a sloppy drunk for a while. It's fine. It's a phase, apparently.
Sounds like a good phase.
yeah.
I might go do that.
And we should all get into that.
go to
Except Lori's
Paris
like
and be a sloppy
18 or something,
know.
and we're in our 30s, so I don't think we can do that now. I think we've passed the time.
I just want to go back to Paris.
You don't have to be a sloppy drunk while you're there, though.
Why not?
Yeah, there's too much to see.
It's true.
Yes, and while that's it, right after Joe has published her story, she learns that Beth, her health has worsened quite a lot, so she leaves right away to go back to Concord. So then we kind of get your flashback. So we're flashing back to 1861.
Yeah.
It's Christmas morning because the book starts on Christmas, really. So the film, they take you there
so
almost right away.
cozy.
Oh, it's such a cozy book. It's
Yeah.
one of those that
And it's a cozy
evokes-
movie, too.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It's one of those stories that evokes coziness in it
Yeah.
that I can't explain.
Yeah.
You just, when you read it or when you watch it, you're just like, I feel like I'm wrapped in a blanket right now, and it's nice.
I mean, when it's snowing outside, it's a very nice movie to watch.
True. Yeah. Also, like the costumes look beautiful.
Yes.
The sets and
The
everything
acting is
looks
fantastic
gorgeous.
as
Yeah,
well,
all
yeah.
of the girls do a really good job, and I will say also especially considering it's for instance, especially Florence Pugh, I find it's a really good thing that she's talented because she's supposed to be very young, probably 11 or 12. Maybe
Is she
not
really?
at the beginning.
Oh, at
when
the
they
beginning,
flash
yeah.
back. And obviously, I understand they wouldn't have wanted to cast two different actors. They just wanted her to play it the whole way through. And she really doesn't look the age that she should be. But you can tell because of the way that she speaks and the way that she carries herself. She's very childish in the
Yeah.
flashbacks. Very childish and very
She's an amazing
different.
actress.
She's so good.
Yeah.
And she's very different 7 years in the
Yes, she
future.
is.
You can
This is
tell
true,
that the
yes.
way that she is different.
Yes.
They all are in a way. But I feel like her change is the most drastic.
And it would be, right? At those ages. If it's,
I think she's
if
supposed
she's
to
11
be
or 12 and then she's supposed to be
closer to 20, basically.
closer to 20, yeah, that's a big difference.
It's a big
Yeah.
jump. Whereas the other girls, I feel like it's much more subtle. The
Yeah.
shift is subtler,
Yeah.
I guess. So it's Christmas morning and the girls have all woken up and everything. Joe's been writing. She's a writer. She's wanted to be a writer forever, as far as I can tell. In fact, all of the girls do have some form of artistic
Hobby,
ability
yeah.
or hobby or something that they're very passionate about. So Joe loves to write. Meg, I would say, has the least of one of all the girls, but honestly, Meg's strength is probably her homemaking ability
Yeah.
and how fucking patient she is with
Well,
everybody.
I mean, I think that would be the natural.
She's the oldest.
Yeah, she's the oldest, right?
Yeah, it kind of shows. I like
Beth plays the piano.
Beth is a beautiful piano player and Amy is a very good painter.
Yeah.
I really like that they got Emma Watson to play Meg, actually, because she has this very quiet sort of grace to the way
Yeah.
that she portrays the character, where I feel like Meg gets a lot of shit, just when people read the book, because people are like, oh, she's very vain, she just wants to be pretty and she wants to find a nice husband and blah blah blah.
Yeah,
First of all,
it's more of a security thing.
yeah, first of all, she wants security for herself and her family. Second of all, it's the fucking 1860s. What do you think she wants?
course.
She's the oldest, and so I think she feels like she's the one who's supposed to find the good husband.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's really great that this novel and this movie,
Yeah.
but the novel
Yeah.
has all these women having their own hobbies, having their own
Mm-hmm.
independence in that way. I know that it was pretty common, in quite wealthy families for
Yes.
girls to have a pastime because they used it to get a husband.
Yeah, it was their cute little quirk
yeah, it was
thing that
their
they did.
quirk. But I think in this, it's really just, it's more because they want to have their own person.
It's genuine.
Yeah.
It's genuine passion.
Yeah.
Basically. So yeah, it's Christmas morning. They've all woken up and they're, getting food ready and doing all of this stuff with Hannah, who's their housekeeper, if I'm not mistaken. Hannah lives with them. She's like half caretaker, half housekeeper. She helps the family with a lot of different stuff. She's also fun. So they've, but their mom is off because they're like, where's Marmee? And she's like, someone came knocking at the door asking for help. And of course, that seems to be what this family, especially the parents.
Yeah, they want to help everyone.
They want to help everybody, and they're very willing to...
They're role models for their kids.
Yeah, they're wonderful parents.
Yeah.
And so she's gone off to do that. She returns shortly after to let them know that I believe it's the Hummel family, who are a very poor family who are living in what's essentially a shack, like not like a little ways away from where their house is.
Yeah.
They're 5 children.
And they're starving.
With just
on
Mrs.
Christmas.
Hummel. I assume Mr. Hummel is also, this is during the American Civil War, so I assume that Mr. Hummel's away at war as well. They have no money at all, and they have no blankets. It's cold, it's Christmas, they have no food. It's Massachusetts, so it snows. Like, it's not like they're in California.
It ain't toasty.
No. So Marmee asks them, listen, could you please give up at least some of your breakfast for them as a Christmas present? Would you be willing to do that? And you can tell
she
that,
says it to the girls.
it gets them they're annoyed, but they do go along with it.
Yeah.
They're still, no matter what, they do make very good decisions.
But again, I like that it's that portrayal of a genuine reaction.
Yeah, where you're
it's if you're a kid,
Yes.
you're like, oh, it's Christmas morning, I want my food,
Yeah.
I want my morning, and then you're like, oh, fine,
you know, when Marmee says it would be a lovely gift, and so of course it kind of persuades all of them that fine, and
fine.
but they do have these really good realistic conversations where the girls are like, oh God, why do we have to be poor? Why don't we have very much stuff?
Yeah.
But that's nice because once they do bring everything to the Hummels, they get set up with them and they they eat with them and everything like that, and they spend time with the children because the children are quite a bit younger than them. They, how do I even put this? They, I think, appreciate even the things that they do have more because you can tell when they get into that little cabin where the family is they're startled by how little they have.
And they feel the girls feel like they are poor.
Yes.
they feel like they don't have much, and that's why they're
not
always
particularly wealthy.
I mean, that's why they're always saying oh, I want to marry someone and who's from a good family.
Yeah.
But I think them seeing that they could have even less than they have was a shock.
Yeah. So meanwhile, while they've been doing this, across the way, basically their direct neighbors are the Lawrence family. So Laurie and his grandfather, Mr. Lawrence, who you think is going to be a piece of shit. He's lovely. I love that there's no proper villain in this story.
No, because there doesn't need
the villain
to be.
in this is circumstance of life, basically.
I mean, that's what I like about this.
Yeah.
It's life is hard enough as it is. Let's just be nice to each other.
Yeah, you don't need to have an
you know?
asshole running
Yeah.
around. So Laurie and Mr. Lawrence see the family going off to do this, and when they come back, Mr. Lawrence has sent over a whole bunch of food for them to have a proper Christmas breakfast themselves.
Very sweet.
As a very nice thing, because he's also very sweet. And Laurie's one of those who is I think a little bit just lost within his own station. He doesn't quite know.
He's like a frat boy.
Sort of how to act properly or what he wants to do, so it makes him silly a lot of the time. But he meets the girls at a party, and they start talking to him, and he and Joe immediately strike up a friendship. Right away you're okay, wow, this is some best friend energy we have going on.
BFFs.
And it's it's cute too. He's an only child. The understanding that we have is that supposedly his father absconded basically and left the family behind, so he's had no one to look after him, so he's just moved in with his grandfather to continue his studies and everything, because they're quite wealthy, so they have an at-home tutor who's John, who's also a character that becomes a fully developed character in the story as well. So he after he meets them, he immediately, obviously, you can tell he and Joe are like drawn to each other. And he also has like really cute moments where, you know, when he's first in like the whirlwind that is like the March house, because the girls are always running around and yelling and going crazy and doing all this stuff. And, you know, Marmee is immediately like welcoming, like, come on in, like, just, you know, you gotta kind of
madness in here.
Yeah, you gotta kind of roll with it and everything. You can tell he's like almost awkward, like he doesn't know how to act about it. This coming from somebody who, like, I'm an only child. If I were in a house like this, I would also be standing there like, oh,
what do I
do? Should I do something? Should I say something? Like, you know, you can tell he doesn't know if he should like sit or stand or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah. Marmee, at just not too long after that, she gets a letter from their father. So that's it. I think he's working as a chaplain in the Civil War, if I'm not mistaken, is what he's doing. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure that's what he's doing, is he's working as a chaplain in the war, and he's like all the way basically in California at that point. And while they live in, because they're like, their dad's off working and stuff like that and doing all of this stuff, that's it. They don't have a ton of money, but the person who does have money is Aunt March, Meryl Streep, who is, I believe Aunt March is a widow. Is she?
She doesn't have children.
No, she doesn't have kids. No. And she's very wealthy. Yeah. Like very, very well off. And she's one who the girls kind of take turns with her as companions, mostly Joe, because she reads to her. But they all find her obscenely obnoxious, which she kind of is. Like, Aunt March has her positives for sure, but she's definitely like quite stuck up.
Well, I mean, she's
very
wealthy
crotchety.
in the 1800s.
Yeah,
like, you know. And
she's older. I think she's meant to be like in her 60s or something, which for that time would have been ancient, basically.
Can you imagine how that would have been now?
Oh man, quality of life was just not what it is today. So, and so she regularly does this, but basically Joe's only going over and reading to her regularly because she really wants, Aunt March tends to go to Europe on like little tours,
she wants an
and
invitation.
she wants to go because she wants to go travel, she wants to write while she's traveling, she wants to be able to get published, she wants to do all of these things, and you could have more opportunity for that in Europe.
Well,
right?
It would also like enhance her writing too, like,
100%.
to have the experience of something different. You know?
Oh, for sure. So when there's like a little outing at one point, and you see that a lot of the contention and like the fights with the sisters tend to be between Joe and Amy. They're both the strongest personalities of the four of them,
and close in age.
Yeah, and they're both very hard-headed about different things, and they're very different from each other.
And there's Lori.
Yeah, and they want different things. Well, that's it. I think almost immediately Amy has a huge crush on Lori. Joe doesn't. It's really like a friendship thing for her, but of course they're very close because they're also very close in age as well, and Amy's younger and she always feels like she's the one who's left out. Beth is the quietest, but she doesn't mind it, I don't think.
Well, I think, like, looking at the dynamics, and I think they captured this really well in the movie, Amy's like the one who claims all of the attention.
She's the baby.
It's whether it's good or bad, you know what I mean? And so by default, what ends up happening is they don't really take her as seriously.
No.
And like Beth is the quiet one and the youngest, but there seems to be, I don't want to use the word respect, but they seem to kind of take Beth a little bit more seriously.
No, they do, you're right.
You know? Whereas Amy, it's like everything she says or does, they're kind of like, ugh.
You're
like,
silly.
There's Amy again, kind of.
Especially,
so she gets
especially
frustrated.
Joe. Joe is very much like the things that you say are stupid, basically, whereas I think Meg is more tactful about it.
Yeah, I think they're just like, you know, Amy and Joe are close in age. They're very like everything that you said, but they're also kind of polar opposites in their way of seeing
different
the world.
In the way that they view the world and what's important. Basically. So, so you do see some of the fights and the gripes with the two of them. In the sense that like. Meg and Joe are going off to the theater at one point with John and Lori.
Yeah, because Meg is going to marry John eventually, right?
Yeah, she does. I don't think it's, at this point, I think they're just going because they're having fun, but John is definitely interested. I believe that Meg's supposed to be quite beautiful, like in the book as well. I mean, she's Emma Watson, so obviously. So good job casting. Yeah. But I believe like in the book as well, Meg's supposed to be very pretty, so people really like her. Yeah. So they're going off to the theater, and of course, again, Amy's pulling her whole like, oh, I never get to go anywhere. I don't get to do anything. I'm bored, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
See, this is where I find you can really tell that she's playing a younger character because she's, like, very whiny about it.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay.
Yep.
And so when they still ignore her and leave without her and act like she's being silly, she takes Joe's notebook where she's basically been writing a novel in it and she burns it. Oh, it's
such
so...
an asshole move.
It's so upsetting. So, you know, obviously Joe, when she gets home, she's fucking devastated by this. I think it's like some of the most emotion that the character has at any point is to do with her writing. So to get sort of Joe to forgive her, I think it's basically the next day, Joe and Laurie are going out ice skating on because there's a pond really not far away, and Amy goes chasing after them. Joe ignores her, but of course Amy falls through the ice.
This is why they don't take you seriously, Amy.
Oh my god. And she's so, and like, you know, like that whole scene too, that's what I'm saying, this is why you can tell she's younger. She's running after, she's like, Joe, wait! Like, it's so much, you're like, okay, no, like, 16-year-old girl would do that. She's definitely like 11.
Yeah.
So anyway, Laurie saves her, which I also think reinforces the huge fucking crush that she has on him.
Oh, I know, like that savior complex now,
And she does get better, she's totally fine, even though at that time that definitely could have meant that you died.
Yeah, she got lucky, that's for sure.
She really
She
does.
was not as lucky as Beth, but...
No, oh my god. Okay, so there's this cute little thing going on where Mr. Lawrence, I believe that the understanding is that Laurie's mom passed away.
Yes.
And she used to play the piano at the big house all the time. And Mr. Lawrence obviously misses his daughter terribly, I'm sure. And is sad because there's no one playing the piano anymore. And since Beth is good at it, he's very cute, and he asks if she would like to come over regularly and make use of the piano, since of course, you know, again, the March family can't really afford to have their own piano, so so she does that as well, which is really nice. There's a full love story that sort of develops between Meg and John, which we will see culminates in a marriage and children and stuff later.
Very wholesome.
It's really cute. It's cute, and I do like that even when you see them at a later date, they do, again, like their problems feel rooted in reality, like they feel realistic, you know, where again, like John's only working as a private tutor, he also doesn't make very much money, but she fell in love with him and she married him despite that. Against March's wishes. Boy, was she not happy about that.
I mean, but again, she's very stuck up, and she's
set on money as well. She's like, well, that's the only thing that's important.
Yep.
You know, so, but they do have, like, their own problems. You know, Meg wants to be able to, like, buy new fabric for dresses and stuff, and she does at one point, like, she makes, like, and also, it's the 1860s, and she says that she bought, like, several yards of fabric, and it cost her $50. She said $50 coming out of that thing, and I was like, huh!
That's a lot of money, no wonder, like, he was kind of like,
probably, like, $1,000 now, like, fuck.
Yeah.
You know, and meanwhile, like, John needs a new coat for winter, like, his is more important.
I know.
But I understand that, if it's difficult, and again, it's her, everybody's got like a little thing, it's her character flaw. She's very focused on, like, she likes pretty things and she wants nice things.
I mean, like, again, if you think about the time and you think about the fact that they were 4 girls growing up and she's the oldest, like, she obviously wants to be able to have pretty things and kind of show that, you know, also culturally growing up, she was probably told, like, you know, once you get married and you marry a nice man, he'll buy
nice
you
things.
pretty things, you know? And that's what she wants and that's what she expects.
Yes.
So, you know, kind of like victim of her environment or, you know, upbringing
and
kind of thing.
She's always just kind of disappointed that they're not particularly wealthy, but I will say she legitimately loves her husband.
She does.
It's just it's like a gripe that she does have about it. So when this is going on, because we've sort of jumped forward in time, we're also still keeping up with Amy, who, again, we're seeing a lot of the back and forth scenes of when she was very childish versus a much more mature version of that character, who, you know, you like a lot more because she's not acting like a small child anymore. You know, her and Laurie are slowly but surely developing, like, their own new kind of relationship while they're in Paris. To the extent that you're sort of like, oh, okay, something's going on, because they're spending time together, and the guy, Fred, who's been courting Amy, basically, is pretty much expected to propose to her, because they've known each other for quite a while now, and Laurie's like, don't. don't marry him. And when she asks him, it's a really good scene because she's painting.
Yeah.
And she says she's just not going to do it anymore because she's like, what's the point? And he's encouraging her to do so. But when they start talking about this aspect of things, he's like, don't marry him. And she's like, what? Why?
Why?
And he's literally, you know why. And it's just like the
Boys are so stupid.
I know, just say what you mean.
I know.
Anyway, and even though, and you know, she gets very upset because for her, she's like, I have been playing second fiddle to Joe my whole life.
Yeah.
And
she
I
wants
will
this
not
one
be,
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and she's like, I will not be your second choice because she turned you down.
Yeah.
Go away.
Yeah.
Basically.
Good for her.
Which I do understand.
Yep.
But despite all of this too, because she's still like, she's in love
She
with
loves
him.
him, so she turns down Fred as well.
Yeah.
So it's like, you can just feel like their aunt being like, what are you doing?
Well, you can see it too,
Yeah.
because she turns down Fred's proposal and she goes back to the house, right? And Aunt March is like, what happened? She's like, I turned down Fred's proposal, and Aunt March has just told her that Laurie's left, like he's leaving
Yeah.
Paris.
Yeah.
And she's like, what?
Whoops, I fooked up.
And it's like, oh, fuck.
Yeah. Anyway, then they go back to the past.
Yes.
Yep.
And Mr. Lawrence has given Beth his the piano.
Yep.
Basically. And she goes to say thank you to him, but unfortunately, right before that, she's gone to see. Okay, so all the girls were being annoying about not having time, quote unquote, to go see the Hummel family, so that poorer family that lived close by.
Yep.
And she's like, fine, I'll just go myself. So she goes herself to see them and bring them food. But unfortunately, the family's contracted scarlet fever, which would have been very often deadly, especially for younger people at that time. And it is confirmed not too long after. First of all, Beth has contracted it from them. And second of all, I believe the youngest baby in the Hummel family passed away from it, which is awful.
Really sad.
So she's very ill for quite a while. She does get over it in the sense she does recover, but her health never fully snaps back to normal.
Yeah. And, you know, like you said, it's more dangerous to younger people. And so because of this, they send Amy away to stay with Aunt March.
Yes, because Meg and Joe have both had it previously and they're okay. So it's like chickenpox, right? Like if you've had it, you're probably fine. But if you haven't and you're vulnerable to it and Amy's not had it, that's why they send her to stay with Aunt March, who then decides she's the only member of the family who's worth anything at this point.
Yeah,
all the others
her
are a lost cause.
Only hope for like marrying rich.
Yeah,
basically.
that's it. So she's like, you need to marry well, and I think she, you know, she was told that at a young age, so she's probably quite hyper focused on it as well.
Yeah, whereas like Meg was kind of taught marry well, but marry for love. I think
exactly,
because she was closer to her parents. Like when you think about it, like if you know Papa March went off to the Civil War. Meg and Joe would have been the ones who saw their parents together the longest. And so, especially Meg, she would have learned the importance of like marrying for love.
For love as opposed to
money.
Yeah.
Whereas like Amy is fully being influenced by their aunt at this point.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and she spends a lot of time with her as well. She doesn't act like her, but she spends a lot of time with her, so it's kind of normal. And I think she feels, it's almost like, I feel bad for her because she's the youngest, and it's almost like they're putting this responsibility on her shoulders now. Like, okay, well, you have to be the one to do it.
Yeah.
And Amy's like, oh, okay, I guess. So luckily, Beth's fever does break, and she overall gets better before Christmas, and it's Christmas exactly 1 year later when their dad comes back from the war, which is, I'm sure, probably the best Christmas present any of them could ask for, which is great.
Yep.
It's sad because there's, like, two scenes close to each other where, like, things go really differently from each other. So in the earlier scene, Joe had been taking care of Beth, who recovers, even though she thinks that she hasn't for a minute. Like, she's not in bed in the morning, and Joe's like, fuck, and she runs downstairs. But Beth's actually okay. She's sitting at the table eating breakfast with Marmee and Hannah. But then when you jump forward in time again, like we said, unfortunately, Beth never fully got her health back, and she's had bad health back and forth ever since. And, you know, Joe has used money that she's made on stories to take her to the sea so that she can be out in the fresh air and get better. But unfortunately, she doesn't make it. She passes away.
Yeah.
At this point, which always in the book made me so sad. I was always like, oh no.
No, not the youngest, not the baby.
Not that one.
Yeah.
And everybody has like a really hard time with it. Obviously, which is totally normal. Like the sisters, You know, their dad, Marmee, Mr. Lawrence really doesn't take it well at all.
No.
He has a really hard time with it as well. So, so we kind of have to like move on from that. And again, we flop back to, to Meg and John's wedding at that point, where Aunt March makes her disapproval very well known, but it's quite funny.
Joe tries to convince her to run away.
Oh my god, she's so funny. She's like, we could go and we can just run anywhere and I'll work and I'll do this and I'll do that kind of thing. And Meg's like, I'm not being forced into this. Like, I love him. I want to get married.
I want to get married.
And she says, I think something that slowly starts to put things into perspective for Joe, where she says, just because my dreams are different than yours doesn't make them like irrelevant or bad.
Wrong. Yeah, I really appreciated that statement. And I think it's also important to remember, especially as we go through our topics this month. You know, in the past, we always kind of taught women, you want to get married, you want to have babies,
and that's your value.
And that's
that
your
you
value.
Provide. Yeah.
But there are genuinely some women that's what their dream is, and I think that's fine. And even now, like, that is their dream, and that's fine.
Yes,
you know?
I think it's just as valid to have the dream of having a spouse and being a mother as it is to have the dream of pursuing a particular career or aspiration of some kind yourself as like a personal project, basically, or in your job.
The whole point is just to have the option.
Yes. Basically, we have choices a lot
that's
now.
all it is, you know?
We didn't used to. And so at this time where this was, you know, what you thought was your value, I think it's more than normal. Just like at any time, it's more than normal to decide, like, this is what I want out of my life, is to get married and have children and raise my family. And I think that makes sense. And I think that that's really well reflected in Meg's character. That she maybe at some point wanted something more and something different, but overall she really chose the path that she wanted in the end, and it just so happens that that path was considered the more traditional of them. Sure.
But those were her dreams, you know?
So when we've kind of like jumped forward a time. Okay, so first of all, after the wedding, that is when Laurie proposes, and Joe is like, absolutely not. It would never work. It would be a terrible idea. And she does, I know in the book, I don't think they ever talk, she has a conversation with Marmee, but she doesn't come out and say it. But in the book, she has previously spoken to Marmee about the fact that Laurie is like a brother for her. She doesn't have those types of feelings for him. Like, she loves him, but not in the way that he loves her.
But doesn't she say she doesn't see herself married?
She does. She says she doesn't see herself married at all, and basically what happens is that she doesn't see herself married at all because she's never fallen in love with someone. Until later. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler.
Yeah. So, and that was when Laurie had gone off to Paris because he was heartbroken, basically. So now that we've jumped forward and Beth has passed away, you know, obviously Amy's on her way home because, of course, she is. Her sister's just died, and she's obviously she's also traveling back because Aunt March is quite ill. Laurie goes back with them, and we just kind of see, like, right before they're coming back, basically, that first of all, Joe's having a bit of a crisis of conscience where now she's starting to feel like there's a bit of a void in her life, and she's been so intent on her pursuit of being a writer and being alone.
She starts wondering if she made a mistake turning down Laurie.
Yeah, she's literally like, I'm lonely. But it's good because she's doing these things. Like, we all have moments like that, and she's doing these things, but Marmee points out to her that she's probably doing them for the wrong reason, where she's like, do you think I can get him to ask me again? And she's like, yeah, but, and Marmee's like, well, do you love him?
Yeah, do you actually want that?
And and you can tell it's a no, but she wants someone, you know, she wants someone to be with and stuff, and simply
I think she's kind of panicking because, like, Meg got married, Amy is off in Europe, and Beth died.
Beth passed away, so she's like, who am I going to have?
Exactly.
You know, and so she starts feeling like she has, like, a void to fill, which is not true, but, you know, but I understand why she would feel that way. she does write a letter to Laurie. Thank God he never sees it, because
I know she doesn't send it. Whew.
no, she puts it in that little box in the forest or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And then she winds up, she
gets
goes
it
back to
back.
take
Yeah.
it later. Yeah, before he sees it. Thank goodness, because Laurie and Amy come back from Paris to reveal, hey, guess what? We're getting married.
Didn't they
Or
get
they
married?
got married.
Yeah,
before
they already
came back.
got married.
Yeah, they're like, ta-da, we kind of fell in love. Surprise, surprise, while we were in Europe. And we got married. We're married now.
Yep.
Which I know a lot of people get really upset about that, but I don't really, because it kind of seems realistic to life.
Well,
like, he
yeah.
got over his, his feelings for Joe.
Well,
She
he
never
knew that
had
it
those sorts
wasn't-
of feelings
Yeah,
for him.
like he knew it wasn't gonna happen, so he was like, all right, well, I guess I better move on.
Yeah, and he, wound up seeing her sister in a totally different light because she's a different kind of person than she was 7 years ago.
It's true, she does mature.
Mature quite a bit. She becomes quite mature. Yeah. so anyway, they get kissed and they get, oh yeah, okay, that's right, they get married on their way back.
That's one, yeah. So they show up and they're like,
Yes.
ta!
And Joe and Laurie obviously agree to remain friends because of course they do. Why wouldn't? And why wouldn't they? And she gets rid of that letter and I believe thinks that it's probably better
Yeah.
that she did, basically. And around this time, since Beth's death, she's not really been writing because she's been so
Joe has
unhappy.
not been
Joe's
writing.
not been writing, yeah. She's been really unhappy and feeling like this is a waste of her time and it's never really going to go anywhere. But luckily, after all this has happened, I think it's given her some form of closure to an extent. And so she starts writing a book really based on her sisters and
Yep.
their lives together.
Which is the movie.
Which is the movie,
Well,
and
the
she
book.
sends the like the initial chapters that she has to the editor. And while all this has been happening, as she's been working as a governess, I have not talked about this at all, but as she's been working as a governess, she's met the other teacher. His name's Frederick. He's
Friedrich?
German.
Yeah. Friedrich Bell?
Beth, I think.
Something like that,
Yeah,
yeah.
something like that. Who is another teacher who's working with the kids that she's been working with in New York. And they've struck up a friendship, but a friendship that's definitely becoming something else, which everybody seems to see except her. And there's this very funny scene where he shows up at the house to see her, and the whole fucking family's there, and they have dinner, and he announces at dinner that he's been offered a teaching position in California. So he's decided to take it because, according to him, there's nothing keeping him there, and she's never seemed to reciprocate his feelings.
like,
so he's
hint,
like, bye.
huh?
And it's just, and you see them kind of, she's very visibly upset by this, but like she doesn't say anything. And then when he leaves, the whole family is like,
What are you doing?
what are you doing? So there's this whole scene where she basically, everybody's like, can you please go after him and tell him that you don't want him to
You're
leave?
ridiculous.
So she does the romance thing where she runs after him and they kiss in the rain because
So
she's like, I don't want you to leave, and he's like, okay.
That's what I was
I
saying.
didn't
That's
wanna-
why I came here.
I didn't want to go.
Yeah.
And then we get to see the actual final publication. First of all, Aunt March does die, and she leaves Joe the house, her giant fucking house that she had. And Joe decides to turn it into a school.
Yeah.
And they do that, which is wonderful. So they can bring in children from all over the area, and they make it a school for boys and girls, so that girls can also get an education in the area.
Love it.
Love it. And the whole family can kind of work there doing different things, which they do. And at the same time, due to his daughter's persuasion, because Mr. Dashwood, the editor, has read the chapters and he's like, about them, of her book, and his daughters are like, Dad,
I
what's
wanna
going to happen
know.
with this? Like, what
Yeah.
happens with the girls? What's
Yeah.
the end of the story? Like, what's going
you
on?
have to publish it.
Yeah, he agrees to publish the story.
Yeah.
And so she gets to have her novel actually fully published, and there's like, a nice little montage at the end where, you see the book being bound, and she gets like the first copy of it, and it's really great. And that's the end of the movie.
It's so sweet and wholesome.
We love it. And I love that, well, I mean, I do love like the passage of time, but also that so much of this story is about women having relationships with other women and family, and what that aspect of things means, and how, like, all of the sisters are so different,
But how
the
that's
love is still
important.
there.
Yeah. I just love it. It's just so wholesome, and then
Yes.
it just leaves you feeling like, oh, I wish I had a really big family of
Yeah,
sisters.
and Louisa May Alcott, was writing this for quite a long time. And I believe that the idea of that's it, like what happens in the film is very similar to like what she experienced. I think it had to do with like family or whatever members reading the pages and being like, I want to read this. I want to read this. So then that's it. So then like an editor had agreed to publish the story, and she would actually go on to write 2 other novels based in the same thing, which I think there was one called Little Men a few years later, and then one called Joe's Boys, if I'm not mistaken.
I heard about Joe's Boys. I didn't hear about Little Men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she went on to publish like other volumes of that, basically, which again, at the time, in, you know, Civil War era America, would have been something that would have been quite impressive for her to do.
It really would have, especially if it was popular.
Yes, and particularly for it to have had the lasting effect that it's had, which, like, it really has. It has
really
stood the test of time.
Like, it's one of those stories that I feel we can relate to no matter how long it's been.
Everyone has a character of the characters that they can... They find that they can relate to, whether it's any of the girls, whether it's Marmee, Lori, any of them really.
Bob Odenkirk.
Dad. It's so lovely and so wholesome. Good job, Greta Gerwig. so
Way to
good.
go.
So
Cozy.
good. I think she wrote the screenplay for it as well. Good for her.
I think she did, yeah.
Yeah. I did see a thing that I thought was hilarious, because the whole thing with between Joe and Friedrich, like, she does marry him in the book, but there's no chasing in the rain scene or whatever. And because that's such like a romantic sort of cliche, apparently Greta Gerwig wrote that in, and they were like, really? And she was like, yes, I've been seeing this in movies since I was a kid. I want it in my film. I want it.
We're doing it.
So they did, and I was like, that's funny.
That's so cute.
Because as people who grew up at times where like every rom-com has something like that.
Hey, good for her. I mean, I would do the same thing.
Oh, for sure.
How many romance movies am I going to make?
And what tropes are they going to include? What little cliches will they have in them? So many, because I'm so used to seeing them.
Eventually, the creative juices run out, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's eventually like, yeah, fuck it, we'll just do that.
We'll just do that.
Yeah, we love this movie, if you couldn't tell. You know.
So nice.
It's so great. Watch it if you haven't watched it. It's wonderful.
And if you have seen it, go watch it again.
Go watch it again, just to make yourselves feel better about the snow.
Yeah.
It's the one thing to cheer.
Make the snow go away.
I feel like we're going to complain about this periodically for the next while, and anybody who lives in an area that hasn't been affected much, or that where it just doesn't snow, is going to be like, what the fuck is wrong with them?
Why is there so much snow forever?
If you lived in eastern Canada, you would understand.
It doesn't go away until suddenly it's summer. Like,
yeah.
We get like a week of spring, and then we've got like giant snow piles in like 30-degree weather.
Yeah, it's very weird. Yeah, and they like melt within like a few days.
Yeah, it's so weird.
It's real strange. It doesn't matter. Anyway.
We just can't wait to wear shoes outside.
Oh, we're so excited. We're so excited. I can't wait to do that.
I know. I want all the people in California right now to be like, what do they wear right now?
What are you wearing right now? Boots, guys. We have to wear boots. We have to wear snow boots and big coats.
They're really
you know
annoying.
What? It snows in certain parts of Northern California. I'm sure some people know what I'm talking about. Anyway.
Florida.
Yeah.
Anywho, we digress.
Have you guys seen Little Women? Have you read Little Women? I hope so. If you haven't, you should. You can let us know about that over on Instagram at fullybookedca, or you can check out our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/book was way better. And if you are still here with us, professing our love for all things Little Women, please feel free to leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you're listening, because it really helps us get the show out in front of more people. But until next week, guys, keep on reading.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.